What is up? GoodMicWork back at you. You know when I come up here sometimes and I say, oh, this is going to be a shorter than normal video, and I wind up talking for 30 minutes anyway? That will not be happening tonight. This will legitimately be a pretty short video. Why do you ask? Because Monday Night Raw sucked, that's why. Pretty boring show overall, and also a little bit confusing, and just wasn't very good. But since it's SummerSlam time, it's the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, it's a really busy time in wrestling, and we're in that transitional period after the WWE draft and the brand split and all of that, and I'm trying to figure out how to handle these commentaries anyway, so I want to try to come up, at least for right now, and give thoughts on each show individually for as long as I can. But since Raw wasn't very good tonight, I'm just going to give some brief thoughts on it, because I actually have to go out and meet some friends. So I'm going to go out and do that, and then I'm going to come home and edit this thing and give it to all of you. Dean Ambrose has just sat down at the desk with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they have began their interview. I've watched the first 10 minutes of it. So far, a few interesting facts from Dean Ambrose as far as his music tastes, and I completely forgot or didn't even realize that Dean Ambrose is from the same city as Brian Pillman, which is very fitting because the two of those guys have drawn comparisons from each other for a long time, and Pillman, of course, has all that history with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I also found it quite amusing that the movie Office Space that came out in the late 90s helped influence Dean Ambrose's decision to drop out of high school. The guy had a pretty rough childhood, it sounds like, and a pretty interesting story, so I'll be interested to watch the rest of this interview when I get home tonight, and I will come up and give some comments on that probably when I talk about SmackDown. You got a lot of videos coming from me this week. I revealed on Twitter over the weekend that I decided to put together a special episode pertaining to SummerSlam. I've done this a few years in the past, coming up here with special episodes around SummerSlam time, around WrestleMania time. I still need to do some stuff for Survivor Series and Royal Rumble in the future. But I figured since SummerSlam is such a fun pay-per-view to experience that I'd come up with another special episode. So those of you who follow me on Twitter know what this episode is going to be about. Those of you who don't, I guess it will be a surprise. As far as when I upload it, I'm not sure yet. It's pretty much done, but I don't want to upload it on top of another video. I'd rather space them out a little bit. So you'll get that video probably either tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday, just whenever I feel is best. And I also want to come up here and talk about SmackDown probably tomorrow or Wednesday, and what I might wind up doing, depending on how SmackDown is, especially if SmackDown isn't a very good show, like Raw was not a very good show tonight, I might wait until late Wednesday night and come up here and talk about SmackDown and the latest on the Cruiserweight Classic as we are entering the second round in that tournament. And NXT, I think, also airs that night as well, so maybe I can come up on Thursday and do a combo show talking about all that stuff. So I just have to figure out the best place to release this special episode. As far as tonight goes, I'm just briefly going to touch on a few key points in Monday Night Raw. The show was just not quite as good. I'll cut it some slack. I mean, it had a few good moments, one in particular that I really liked, but overall, what we've seen from Raw so far, this show did not measure up, and I found myself struggling to pay attention throughout most of this thing. The main event was probably the most perplexing thing of the whole night, because we didn't know what the main event was going to be, but we did know that Daniel Bryan was invited to Monday Night Raw by Mick Foley. Now, Stephanie McMahon wasn't there tonight. She was off doing something. They explained that in a cell phone call to Mick Foley. And Foley's rocking the suit now. So what happened to the sweatpants and flannels? So Foley is kind of getting a little bit more corporate. In his segment with Daniel Bryan tonight that closed the show, he called out Daniel Bryan. The two of them talked. Foley seemed really irritated with Daniel Bryan because Daniel Bryan's been cracking jokes. I think the Milky Way Championship is the funniest thing I've heard all week. Daniel Bryan poking a little bit of fun at the Universal title that Raw is creating, and Mick Foley took offense to that, and he seemed really upset with Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan was trying to keep it lighthearted, and Mick Foley was getting pissed. And I'm wondering if Mick Foley is kind of conforming to that corporate way, and he might become a heel GM or something like that. I think they're showing some signs of that. And I was waiting for something big to happen. Of course, the reason Daniel Bryan is there is because they're trying to clear the air between the two brands, because Brock Lesnar and Randy Orton have both invaded the other show and attacked their SummerSlam opponent, and the GMs are trying to work shit out. So I thought for sure maybe Randy Orton would come out there and RKO Mick Foley, because certainly a promo between Bryan and Foley is not going to close the show. Something's got to happen. Somebody's got to get physical. They got to have a match or something. So I thought maybe since Brock Lesnar is advertised for Monday Night Raw next week, I thought maybe Mick Foley could get RKO'd by Randy Orton, who is the Legend Killer, who has a ton of history with Mick Foley, as we know, dating back over a decade. So if he were to do that, that would strengthen the tension between the two brands and Foley and Daniel Bryan and all of that. And then maybe next week, Brock Lesnar can show up on SmackDown and F5 Daniel Bryan. So I kind of thought they would do something like that. But right in the middle of Foley and Daniel Bryan talking, Rusev comes out. Rusev already had a busy night. He had that whole wedding ceremony with Lana, and they had cakes, and they did a video package of their pictures. And my God, Lana is driving me crazy. Just when you think she can't get any hotter, she's hotter. It's ridiculous. So I was staring at her during the whole segment and drooling all over myself and barely even paid attention to what was being said. All I know is Rusev is pretty damn hilarious himself. Roman Reigns, of course, crashes the party. You could see this coming a mile away. For fuck's sake, there were cakes in the ring, so you knew that somebody was going to get covered in cake before the whole thing was over. And of course, Roman Reigns comes out. He's got to cut a promo. He challenges Rusev for the U.S. title at SummerSlam. The two of them start fighting, and he shoves Rusev, who hits Lana, and she lands in the cake and gets cake all over her. And Rusev is pissed off, and he's yelling at Mick Foley backstage, and Foley makes the match at SummerSlam, Roman Reigns versus Rusev for the U.S. title. But Rusev appears again in the final segment to tell Mick Foley that they don't need a Universal Champion because he's the top guy, he's the top draft pick, he's the only singles champion on that brand, and he should be the number one guy, I guess. Which then prompts Cesaro to come out to the ring for some reason. Cesaro already had a match earlier on the night against Sheamus, and he beat Sheamus, and Sheamus is getting really frustrated that he can't defeat Cesaro, and you can tell he's about to blow. So Mick Foley then decides right there in the middle of the promo between him and Daniel Bryan to make a United States title match right then and there to close the show in the main event, Rusev defending against Cesaro. So now you're thinking, well shit, are they going to have a title change? Is Randy Orton going to appear and RKO Rusev and cost him the United States title? Because during the promo, Daniel Bryan commended Cesaro on all of his great work, and those two guys have a ton of history, and he also told him that he thinks he's extremely underutilized at Monday Night Raw. So they planted a little seed that maybe Cesaro could be switching brands. So I thought maybe he would win the United States title, and then they would run an angle where maybe his contract was up and Raw didn't notice it, and then Daniel Bryan and Shane were able to sign him behind Stephanie and Mick Foley's back and steal him away from Monday Night Raw and take the United States title over to SmackDown. I thought they might do something like that. But what wound up happening is Sheamus just interferes in the match and helps Rusev defeat Cesaro. And Sheamus and Cesaro now have a very good reason to wrestle at SummerSlam. And since they teased Cesaro possibly going to SmackDown, maybe the hate between these two guys is so strong that the match at SummerSlam will have a stipulation: the loser leaves Raw. Which, if you pull some shenanigans and you have Sheamus cheat and win, you can send Cesaro over to SmackDown, where I think he might be better off. But the whole main event segment in general was very confusing. It seemed very disorganized. It actually was reminiscent of the opening segment of Raw. Normally Raw opens with the GMs and then wrestlers coming out to talk and interrupt, and then they get put in matches together that are going to happen right now. And that's the type of shit we usually see to open the show, but this time we saw it close the show. So it was just a little weird, came off a little bit funny. Normally, I would never in a million years complain about Cesaro and Rusev being in the main event of Raw, but it just didn't feel very good. I don't know. But it served its purpose, I guess. It sets up Roman Reigns, who did come out, by the way, at the end of the match and nailed Rusev with a hellacious spear. I mean, that was unbelievable. So you got the setup between Rusev and Roman Reigns at SummerSlam and Cesaro and Sheamus. So really, I guess they did what they had to do there. It was just a little odd the way it all was pulled off. The only other really major thing that took place on Raw was the build-up between Seth Rollins and Finn Balor for the Universal title at SummerSlam. This time, instead of both of these guys being in the ring, they cut two separate promos. Rollins came out to the ring first and cut one of his very long Triple H-like promos. Did a good job, but when you talk for that long, sometimes it's really easy to lose interest. Basically, talking shit about Finn Balor and says that he's going to be the new Universal Champion and all of that. Later on in the show, it was Finn Balor's turn to speak, and this was done in a pre-tape segment where he's sitting down with some regular clothes on, and there's lighting and there's smoke, and he's telling him a story about the demon, and he's going to meet the demon at SummerSlam. The whole thing was just really, really well done. That's the type of atmosphere I like seeing Finn Balor in. I felt like he was a tiny bit exposed last week in the ring, just cutting a one-on-one promo in the ring face-to-face with a guy. You know, the whole mystique of Finn Balor is his character and all of that. Apparently next week Seth Rollins is going to call out the demon. And I know Finn Balor usually waits till big pay-per-views and big shows to don the body paint and do the whole entrance and the whole thing. But he might make an appearance next week on Raw in the go-home show to SummerSlam. That's going to be pretty cool. But his segment tonight, his promo on Seth Rollins, was 100 times better than Seth Rollins' promo on Finn Balor. That was easily my favorite spot of the night. I mean, I'm really rooting for Finn Balor to be a major player in wrestling for many years to come. I fucking love that guy. Chris Jericho was pretty damn funny tonight as well, and how fucking adorable is Jericho and Owens together. Those two should be BFFFFs forever. What a great team. Jericho had recruited Owens, I think, last week to watch his back. Enzo and Cass opened the show tonight, and Enzo, I gotta be honest, he's cut funnier promos. He was not as on point tonight. The writing for him and the jokes that he was given were not nearly as funny as some of the other ones he was saying in previous weeks, although he was pretty funny the way he was mad at Jericho for basically cock-blocking him last week with Sasha Banks. So he's talking shit to Jericho. Jericho then comes out and cuts a hilarious promo on the two of them. Jericho, I'm telling you, he makes me laugh harder and harder with each passing week. His jokes were actually better than Enzo's, and then he introduces Kevin Owens as the guy that's going to watch his back, and Enzo and Jericho then have a one-on-one match with Owens and Cass each on the outside of the ring. It ends up ending in a DQ with Jericho winning when he hits Enzo with the codebreaker, and Cass basically has no choice but to come in and stop the count, and I think he hits Jericho with a big boot or something like that and gets Enzo disqualified. So that prompts Enzo and Cass to challenge Jericho and Owens at SummerSlam in a tag team match. So I like that. I mean, Kevin Owens, I would really like to see them do something more with him in the future. I think they will, but SummerSlam is so stacked already with these singles matches and these high-profile matches and these title matches. You got to have him do something. So to temporarily put him with Jericho, I think is really fun for the fans to watch because those two Canadians are fucking hysterical together. You know it's going to be short-lived. They'll eventually implode. They already don't like each other. They've had segments on TV before where they're at each other's throats. So clearly this cannot last, but for right now, I'm enjoying them. They are a fun little couple. What else? We had Braun Strowman and yet another squash match against another jobber with another jobber interview. This time the guy doesn't say a fucking word when Byron Saxton asks him a question, and he goes in there and gets completely raped by Strowman. Sasha Banks improved her odds at SummerSlam by defeating Dana Brooke with a stipulation that if Sasha won, Dana Brooke would be banned from ringside at SummerSlam, so it's going to be one-on-one, Sasha versus Charlotte for the title. They hinted to the fact that Nia Jax could be coming after the belt next. I would like to have them not rush this shit, please. You know, can you have Nia Jax have a few more of these squash matches and then take on someone like Paige or another woman with a little bit of credibility and have her beat her at the next pay-per-view and wait a couple of months before you give her a title shot? If they're going to do this shit at Backlash or Night of Champions or whatever, I think that's a little bit too quick, but they did hint to that. And I do think that Sasha will be retaining at SummerSlam as well, but we'll get into more on that later. Gallows and Anderson were pretty damn funny tonight as well in their little doctor's office skit that they did, talking about Big E's nuts, the way they posterized him, or whatever the hell they were calling it. Basically, a disgusting nut shot to Big E last week, and he's apparently on the shelf. I don't know if this injury's legit. I don't think it is. I think it's storyline, but damn, when they show that replay, it's amazing that Big E's not in the hospital. And then they attacked the New Day tonight on Raw as well and tried to do the same thing to Kofi until Xavier chased him off with the chair. So you've got that match announced and set for SummerSlam for the tag team titles. Gallows and Anderson taking on the New Day, and with Big E kind of being on the shelf, you don't know if he's going to be 100%, and I think it's pretty clear that they're probably going to drop the belts at SummerSlam 1 year after they won them. And I kind of had a thought about maybe Big E going heel. I mean, if he's off of TV for a couple of weeks here, he doesn't return until SummerSlam, maybe he's pissed at New Day for not protecting him, and he blames them for the injury that he suffered at the hands of Gallows and Anderson. I don't know. Maybe he teams up with the two of them, and they form their own little club, and Finn Balor's not even involved. I know that seems far-fetched. Big E is so charismatic and so fun as a babyface. He should probably stay that way, although if they're going to take the belts off the New Day, you know, you just got to wonder how long the New Day can continue doing their thing if they're not going to be tag team contenders. I'm sure there will be a rematch with Gallows and Anderson. I don't know if they're going to stay a unit for very long, so maybe it's time to wrap up the New Day. Maybe they have Big E go heel, leaving Kofi and Xavier by themselves. They get beat by Gallows and Anderson and lose the tag team titles, and New Day is disbanded, and they never have a rematch at all. That could definitely be a possibility. Or maybe they want to keep New Day together. Maybe they drop the belts to Gallows and Anderson and then win them back in a couple of months. There's no telling what they could do, but it's possible that this injury to Big E could be leading to something. Looking at my notes here, that's really all I think I need to mention about Monday Night Raw. Nothing else worth really discussing. I have a couple of other things written down here, wrestling news-wise related. Shelton Benjamin apparently has got a torn rotator cuff, and he will not be coming back to the WWE after all, which fucking sucks. I'm hoping that He can still come back in the future, but this is not something that's going to be a quick heal. He's going to have surgery on it, and it could take months and months and months for him to get back to 100%. And by then, who knows if the WWE is even still interested in him. I don't know if he signed his contract before this injury, so I don't know if WWE is handling the surgery and all of that. I don't even know. But he's not coming back to the WWE, at least right now. And it's going to be a while before we ever see him again, if we ever see him again. Also, I did read the comments by Conor McGregor. He started a shitstorm with his WWE wrestlers are pussies remarks and all that shit. A whole bunch of people chimed in, including myself. This guy just seems like a complete fucking shit-talking prick, and I've never really liked him, although he's a great heel. And he's a big wrestling fan, and a lot of people have speculated that this could all be a work. I hope that it is. I hope it is a work. I hope he's trying to get a rise out of the wrestling fans and the wrestlers, and there's been talk of him maybe doing something at WrestleMania one year. I mean, the UFC owes WWE one because they gave them Brock Lesnar, so you know they've got to reciprocate. So either WWE does something with Ronda Rousey or they get one of their other fighters. Either way, Conor McGregor sounds like a fucking asshole, and he's a cocky son of a bitch, and he got his mouth shut once before in his last fight that he had, and hopefully somebody does it again. But it's pretty ignorant to say some of the things he said because it's so ridiculously untrue. Wrestlers are not pussies. I would love to introduce Conor McGregor to Haku. I think Kurt Angle could give him a run for his money. There's a lot of guys in WWE that little 85-pound Conor McGregor would not be able to beat the shit out of. So shut your mouth, you fucking shithead. Unless you're working us, then bravo. So that's it for me. I am out of here. Like I said, stay tuned in the next couple of days. You're going to get 2 more videos from me, my special episode on SummerSlam, as well as a review on SmackDown, the Cruiserweight Classic, and NXT, and more SummerSlam thoughts and stuff like that. So keep an eye out on the Good Mike Work channel for all those videos in the next few days, and I will talk to you very soon. Until then, peace.